all for coming. I hope you realize that you were in for a discussion about why processed foods are bad for you. Are you all in the right place? Basically, there's ingredients in our food that are making us sick, overweight, tired, and causing us pain. Things like corn syrup, MSG, artificial sweetener, colorings, flavorings, pesticides, herbicides. And I'm not trying to freak you out or be a doomsdayer because there's a lot you can do about it, and I'm not saying you need to do what we did, which was freak out and purge our kitchen, but just the closer you can come to eating real foods as opposed to all the processed stuff that you don't know what it is, the better off you're going to be. We're eating so many things. It's not just food, it's our environment too, but as far as the food, we're eating so many toxins and just mysterious chemical names that never even existed 150 years ago. It's not even really food, a lot of the stuff that we're eating. The regulations that are in place are not, once you start reading, you start finding out it's not what you think. I never thought there was any reason to think anything about what I was eating. I just assumed like, oh, there's industries and there's regulators and it all just is fine, but it really isn't. So we'll get into that in a little bit, but the only thing I ever used to pay attention to on food labels was fat grams, calories, and carbs. And that was only if I was trying to lose a few pounds. I didn't look at anything if I wasn't trying to lose weight because I really didn't think about that. Sure, I knew fast food, oh, you're like a heart attack, but you know, when you're young, you feel invincible. Like that's something you worry about later when someone tells you you have high blood pressure. So I never really thought about it at all. We were standard American junk food junkies. We lived on frozen meals, cheap frozen burritos, potato chips. We had like the assortment of Little Debbie cakes in the cabinet. We had a junk drawer in our kitchen, and we don't even have kids, if that's anything. Star Crunch, oh yeah. So, unless again, we were trying to lose weight, then we were like the calorie-conscious crash dieters, going to Walmart and filling up the cart with lean cuisines, slim fast bars, diet pop, and sugar-free gum. That is what we were living on. So I just want everyone to know that the standard American junk food diet, which until 5 years ago I was living on, is destroying our health. We're bombarded with messages every day, unhealthy messages, and there's fake food everywhere we go. And it's like they've turned healthy eating into such a rocket science. You gotta eat low carb, you gotta eat low fat, you gotta watch your calories. That I feel like it's just distracting us from what really, in my mind, matters the most is what's in the ingredients. What are you actually eating? And then if you want to worry about fat, calories, and carbs, go ahead. But are you even eating food in the first place? So the bad thing is about all these food additives, corn syrup, MSG, artificial sweeteners, great. Maybe you already know that and you're trying your best to avoid that. But unfortunately, these regulatory agencies that I was mentioning allow the food companies to do some pretty sneaky stuff. Some of the deceptive claims, for one, these are in no order, and there's many more than these, but one of them is all natural. So you see this a lot now, right? Because the industry has picked up on the fact that everyone wants to eat natural. I mean, really, it's leaving me with no more words to use anymore because they're like obliterating all of them to mean nothing. But the word natural is not a regulated term. So they can put that on the front package of anything. It really doesn't mean much of anything at all. I mean, it has to, I'm not even sure if it has to have, but let's just say it has to have started off as something natural. So it's made from corn. It doesn't mean what they're doing to that corn or what they're adding to that corn is anything that you would ever find in nature. So all natural doesn't mean anything. There can still be MSG, for instance, in there. Another good one is trans fat, or a lot of you are aware of this trans fat thing. You don't want to be eating the trans fat, okay? So you can look on a label, on the nutrition label on the back, and it can say, I'm just making this one up. It can say 0 grams trans fat, which this does happen to say. And it can say no trans fat on front. So anyone know how much trans fat can be in there? 0.5 grams of trans fat per serving. So let's say we're talking about chips, for instance. How many servings do you eat? 1? Anyone ever done that in their life? That's a serving a bag. Okay, so say you eat 3 servings, to be conservative, that's 1.5 grams. And I don't know, it's been a while since I took a math class, but 0 equals 0, not 0 equals 0.5, 0 equals 1.5, so it's deceiving. What else? Oh, the pictures they put on the front of packaging. Like, say this one, for instance. Strawberries and bananas. So you get your, a little bit towards your daily intake of fruit. There's not any fruit in this, which we can get to in a minute. Or the cute little red barn on the farm on the front of the eggs. You think that chicken was laying eggs in that cute little red barn? No. All right, so it's the no MSG MSG that really kind of got my goat, because that's what I got hit with and that made me so mad. So I need to explain a little bit more about MSG. They can even say no MSG on the front, and there can be MSG in it. So maybe you've heard of MSG. Anyone heard of MSG? Okay. How many of you are aware of its presence in Chinese food? That's kind of like the big one. You go in and they'll have signs, some of them no MSG, or you can ask to not have the MSG put in and all that kind of stuff. It's been associated with health problems with Chinese food, the Chinese restaurant syndrome. Anyone heard of that? Where people fall over from a heart attack right after eating Chinese food, sometimes right there in the restaurant, from the MSG. So MSG is added to foods as a flavor enhancer. They want to make the food taste good and addict you to it so you'll buy more. Let's just say, for example, that back in the day with no MSG, if they wanted to make chicken broth, you know, a stock pot this size, let's say, and I'm making this up, 10 chicken carcasses to make flavorful, yummy chicken broth that you would want to eat. Well, now, in this pot over here, if they're going to use MSG, they can maybe use 1 chicken carcass and sprinkle some MSG in there to make it taste more chickeny. MSG doesn't have a particular flavor of its own. It makes other foods' flavors enhanced. Makes your hamburger taste more hamburgery. Makes your chicken more chickeny, your chocolate more chocolatey. So that's why they use it. It saves them money and conveniently makes you want to eat more and more. Like, you know how you can't eat more? You can't eat just one Dorito. Has anyone ever tried? Look at the ingredients list. Monosodium glutamate. That's what MSG stands for. So that's another important thing to know if you don't. Because these manufacturers catch on. Oh, everyone's looking out for MSG. Monosodium glutamate. No one knows what the heck MSG stands for, so they can put that right in the ingredients and no one thinks a thing about it. What else do I want to say about that? The problem with MSG, monosodium glutamate, is that it's the glutamate that's the problem. Okay? The monosodium part, that's just salt. It's the glutamate that's the problem. The glutamate is in dozens and dozens of ingredients besides MSG. But manufacturers know you're only looking for MSG or monosodium glutamate if you're really onto them. So they can say, oh, there's no MSG in here. Oh, look, it's 100% natural too. But no MSG added. Then you see on this one, which you don't always see this, they are kind enough to include a little asterisk that says there's a small amount of glutamate in yeast extract, which just happens to be in here along with some other things. So MSG is 78% glutamate. These other ingredients might be not 78%, some of them are pretty high, and some of them, they get lower as you go on down the list, but there's no limit to how many they can put in there. So what if they put one that's 11%, and one that's 60%, and one that's 40%? You're ending up with just the same amount of glutamate as MSG, but no one's looking for that. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's the problem with MSG. It overstimulates your taste buds, which makes it taste good, makes you addicted. It also overstimulates and disrupts your nervous system. So that's the problem. It leads to all sorts of other health problems, like the things that I was experiencing. I have a couple handouts for you when you leave. They weren't sitting out there when you came in, but one is a list of a bunch of the hidden names that I was just discussing with you that have glutamate in them. And just look at that the same as MSG. Anything bad you've ever heard about MSG, think of all those words the same way. It might have less, so maybe if you're not as sensitive as other people, maybe you can have some guar gum, which is one of them. And maybe you won't have any effect. I sure will, because I react to just about every single one on that list. If you want to know if there's MSG in something, just feed a little bit to me. But anyway, so there's a handout for you with the hidden names. Looks like this, so it's in the back. But just to give you an idea of a few, gelatin, hydrolyzed vegetable protein, yeast extract, modified food starch, caramel coloring, broth, bouillon, which by the way, the problem with broth, say you buy some soup, sorry, interrupted myself. Say you buy some soup, the first ingredient is broth, and then it goes on to the rest of the ingredients. How do you know what's in the broth? They don't have to tell you what's in the broth. You remember the broth I was making up here? Okay. Citric acid, guar gum, like I mentioned, that's in a lot of dairy products, it helps thicken things up. Citric acid, and probably one that's the most common, natural flavors. All right, natural flavors. That's a whole nother story. A natural flavor, sure, it comes from something natural. MSG is actually made by a process they do to natural things, like molasses. They can extract the part out of it that will make MSG. It's very complicated to get into, but we can in the end during the questions. And so it can be natural, but what they're doing to it is so not natural, and it's putting something in our bodies that our bodies are not adapted to. So it causes all sorts of problems. And I'm not just making this up from like some granola eating meeting that I went to or something. There are MDs, like board-certified neurosurgeon Dr. Russell Blaylock. He has a couple books. And this one's called Excitotoxins, the Taste That Kills, and it's all about MSG and all of its hidden names, and aspartame, artificial sweeteners, which I'm not going to have time to talk about, but anything I say about MSG, all the same goes for all the artificial sweeteners. All right, so he's written a couple books all about that. And there's entire books by other people too about aspartame and MSG. So you get your hands on all kinds of stuff like that. But the point is, he's a board-certified neurosurgeon and he's dedicated his life now in retirement to informing people about all of this and all the health effects and all the havoc that it wreaks in our bodies. So the other sheet that I have for you is commonly reported symptoms of MSG toxicity. So everything I mentioned to you that went wrong with me is on this list, but just to give you an idea of the variety of things. A lot of them are acute things, like the heart attack you just have out of nowhere, and some things are like longer-term delayed things, like obesity and fertility problems that they've done studies with rats. In fact, if they want to fatten rats to study weight loss products, what do they use? MSG. Something to think about. Anyways, some common symptoms are swelling of the hands and feet and face, a rapid heartbeat, arthritic pain, muscle aches, heaviness of arms, depression, anxiety, hyperactivity, ADD, aching teeth, seizures, tremors, sleeping disorders, insomnia, migraine headaches, eye symptoms. I have a relative who, when they eat this stuff, will lose their central vision. They can only see peripherally, and the middle is just a black dot. That can happen from MSG. Gout symptoms, restless leg, irritable bowel. Okay, you get the point, and I didn't even finish reading just the highlighted ones here, so make sure you pick up that sheet on your way out. And again, I'm not saying if you have any of those problems, it has to be MSG. I realize there's tons of other causes of things, but it's something to look at, and it's an easy, cheap fix with no side effects. All right, on to the grocery props. So telling you about some of these already. Everyone knows this is processed junk, right? Like if I'm saying avoid processed food, you would figure this probably falls into that category, right? Has MSG in it, monosodium glutamate. So do things like this. You have to be careful with your seasonings. I grew up on this. I loved this stuff. It was in half the stuff my mom made, unbeknownst to her, you know. She's going through all this time, just like many of you are maybe, to make a homemade meatloaf or a homemade roast, and then sprinkling monosodium glutamate on it. So, you know, you could argue you might as well have gone out to a fast food restaurant, as far as MSG goes. Then there's things that you would think are just a single ingredient. So you're avoiding the processed stuff. You're going to make your own dinner. Sour cream. What do you think sour cream should be made of? Anyone? Just yell it out. Sour cream, that's right. That's all that should be in there. Ding, ding, ding. You can have this now. And you will find brands that are just cream, cultured cream that's been soured. This has an entire paragraph. I know you can't see it, but it's got guar gum and carrageenan and other things that will be on that MSG list. And again, it saves the company money. It should be made from cream. Cream is expensive, more expensive than milk. First ingredient here, milk. Then cream, then a bunch of ingredients that gum it up and make it seem thick like sour cream because you're getting ripped off, plus you're getting MSG. Like several of the hidden names for MSG are in here. Modified food starch and the guar gum and the carrageenan. All right, syrup. Where does syrup come from? Trees. Where does this syrup come from? Corn. Yeah, corn. This is just colored, flavored corn syrup. So with syrup, you want to look for pure maple syrup. Only ingredient, maple syrup. Eating salads to be healthy, then you buy your salad dressing at the store. I can tell you I've never seen a single one, even at the natural food store, that don't have at least the xanthan gum or guar gum or something on the hidden MSG list. They're not necessarily doing it to enhance the flavor. Some of those things are used as gumming agents or stabilizers to keep the dressing so it looks all nice and uniformly mixed up in the bottle. Because mine that I make, I have to shake it to make it look like that at home. So, tomato paste. What should be in here? Tomatoes. But what's in here? A whole paragraph. This one happens to be an Italian herb variety of tomato paste, but I've seen lots of people who have this in their cabinet. They don't even realize that it's a flavored one. So it's got all sorts of junk in it. And even ones that aren't flavored, that are just tomato paste, will often have like the natural flavor that I was talking about earlier, which just makes you wonder, like, why would they have to add something to it? Like, They use the crummiest, most tasteless tomatoes that exist because the can next to it just has tomatoes. So yeah, you want to watch out for that. This is a good one, dry roasted peanuts. So they're dry roasted, no oil, so it should just be peanuts, maybe peanuts and salt. But there's a whole paragraph, again. And you can find peanuts that are just peanuts, or peanuts and salt, but you wouldn't want this one. This one happens to be Planters dry roasted, and it has monosodium glutamate in it. And corn syrup, too. And a few other things. So, same thing with tuna. You want to look for that? It says tuna in water. So you would think tuna and water. Sometimes it's tuna in vegetable oil. But on most every can, whether it's water or oil, there's also other things in there. You just wouldn't necessarily think to even look. So this one has vegetable broth, which it says in parentheses includes soy, but it doesn't tell you what the heck else is in it, and sodium pyrophosphate, whatever that is. But you can find tunas that just have tuna, you just have to watch for it. All right, it's really important to take an active role in your own health and wellness. And our day-to-day, how we feel, really does depend a lot on what it is we're putting